All right, so, well, my name is Matias Saggiorato. That's how you pronounce it. I mean, that's how I pronounce it. It's Italian, but it's lost kind of its flavor now that I'm in Argentina. I'm the CTO at SAU. Like Alison said, we're certified WooCommerce experts, and we are WordPress BigWP partners as well. We've been working with WordPress for 10 years now. Let's begin with what I'm here to talk to you about. So, a lot of businesses nowadays, with all this situation in the world, are maybe thinking about diversifying their revenue streams. And you might find yourself in this situation and wonder how you can do that so that when the time comes, you can scale that properly. And in our experience, we worked with a lot of stores that process several thousands of orders every day. And at that scale, it becomes a necessity to have a performance site. So we're going to be taking an example of how that we worked on, and we're going to be giving you a couple of things you can have in mind while building your store for scale. First, we are going to, before we can talk about performance and anything related to times and things like that, we need to understand that there's a lot of things that happen on whenever you load a page from your WordPress site. In this case, let's think of a catalog page for WooCommerce. So I put together here a list of some of the things that might happen. So, all of this happens from the moment that your server receives the request until the browser finishes loading. As you can imagine, some of that happens on the server, which is the WordPress installation, for example, and some of that happens on the browser, which is your visitors' computers and devices. Problems on these areas can happen that can have different approaches to fix, so they need to be treated differently. But before we jump into how to avoid problems in each of these areas, let's see what are the measurements you can use to know how fast all of this process takes. First, you have the time to first byte, which is the time that your server takes to send the HTML, which are the instructions that your browser will follow to load your site on browser. Then you have the time to interactive, which is the time that the browser takes to receive that and also to render that and allow fluent interaction from the user. And then you have the time to load, which is the full time that this whole process takes. There's other metrics that are around here, but we think that these are the most important to look at. So now that we've understood what happens, where it happens, and how fast it happens, let's take a look at each of these areas separately. Let's begin with the backend. The backend is important and is one of the pillars of your success when thinking about scalability, because it's going to dictate how much traffic your site will be able to handle at the same time. With that in mind, you need it's important to understand that no matter how fast your front end is, if your backend is having performance issues, some of your customers may not be able to load, may not even be able to load your site at all. So let's take a look at some of the things that you can have in mind on this area. First, you need to use specialized external services as much as you can and not have WordPress do everything that you need to do on your WordPress, your site. Let's take WooCommerce, for example. It does provide a sales report, and that's a nice feature for when you're not working at scale. But when you have a huge database with maybe 1 million orders, that's processing all that data and generating the reports becomes a really heavy operation. So there's services out there that can help you offload those to out of your server. One example of this is Metric, which will give you also a lot more information than what WooCommerce provides out of the box. Also, it's important to have your development team analyze the code that you're going to be deploying as much as possible, because there's a lot of plugins in the WordPress and WooCommerce ecosystem that will try to solve the same problem in different ways, but not all of those ways work well at scale. So you need to make sure that the plugin that you're going to be using does what you need it to do, but also it does it the way you need it to do it. So in this example here, I have the social comments, for example. I put an exclamation mark there because it's a feature like this, which is seemingly unrelated to the rest of the WooCommerce experience. Let's say you have a footer, a widget in your footer that displays the latest social comments from your social networks. If that's not done properly, it can become a problem for your scalability, because it will maybe be fetching all the comments too frequently or on every page load, and that takes a lot of time, and therefore you can serve less customers on your server. So you should have your team look at that. But you can, if you want to avoid some of that auditing process or reduce the time that you spend, you should rely on trusted plugin developers. There's plugin developers around the WooCommerce and WordPress community that follow the best practices. Specifically in WooCommerce, in our experience, we usually rely on plugins like from Skybridge, Prosperous, or WooCommerce themselves, among others, that we now follow these guidelines and are build stuff that work at scale. And last but not least, you should partner up with the right hosting provider, which that can handle a lot of the load that a WordPress site need to handle at scale. This is going to dictate the processing power that you give your site, and it's going to dictate the quality of the software behind WordPress itself. Okay. Now we make sure that the site can handle a lot of the traffic. Now let's make sure that your site feels fast to your customers. A couple of things that you can do here is, again, choose carefully the plugins that you use. Some plugins will do a lot. You can use maybe a lot of plugins that do a lot of small things, but maybe you can put together something custom that does all of that without any added load, and you can reduce the amount of scripts that you need to load on your front end. Then you should make sure that whatever you end up sending to the browser, in terms of scripts, styles, and images, that's reduced as much as possible in size. There's plugins that can help you with this for both images and scripts and styles. But there's also some hostings like WordPress VIP that will handle this out of the box without the need of any extra plugins. Another nice to have is CDN, which basically will translate to these assets that you're sending to the browser to be delivered from a location nearby your visitor. So it's going to be less latency, and you're going to reduce the load times. And again, last but not least, you need to delay the load of anything you can as much as you can. This can be applied to images. And for example, you can make them load only when they become visible on the viewport of your browser. And you can also apply this to the scripts. For example, in this case, in the example, I'm not sure if you noticed, but I added 2 different types of user behavior tracking. One of them happens before the page becomes interactive to the user, and that's usually not a good practice. Any script that can be deferred to until after the page has become interactive and the user is already engaged should be deferred to that point so it doesn't block the user interaction. Okay, so now we want to talk about a case that we've worked on, that we applied all of this and is successfully working at a scale. And this is Threarn. Threarn is the #1 source for Photoshop, Lightroom, and photography tutorials in the world. A couple of tools that we used here is, of course, WooCommerce, WooCommerce subscriptions, WooCommerce memberships, and a lot of custom code as well. We went custom whenever we needed because to do things in the most performant way we could find. This course, I mean, there's a lot of tools that you can use to measure your speeds, and one of them is page speed. And these were the scores that Threarn was getting before we worked on performance like 2 years ago. And in those 2 years, Google started punishing sites on their rankings because of the score that they get in terms of speed. And at that moment, Threarn turned into a priority to work on performance, and we turned those numbers into this. That is the result of both the work of the development team at SAU, optimizing everything that we can, and also the result of features offered by hosting like WordPress VIP. Okay, at the end of the day, you always need to have your site to be performant. But if you're working at scale, it needs to be performant. Otherwise, it will crash. So I hope that with this talk today, you've learned a couple of ways that can help you to make good decisions when it comes to performance on your site. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much. Let's go to QA time.
Hey, Matias, I have a couple of questions.
Yes.
The first is what counts as at scale when you're talking about selling stuff at scale?
It's anything that when you have a database with more than let's say 500,000 orders, anything becomes slower, and querying that database is slower by default, and you need to make sure that you do everything carefully when you're querying that database and use plugins that do so. Because you're not, whenever you're working in WordPress, you're usually not building everything from scratch. So whatever plugin you use, you need to make sure that it's built and doesn't do any weird queries to your database that take too long and may take your whole site down. So at scale, you mean if you want to put a number on it, whenever you have like a database of more than, let's say, 500,000 orders, then you're starting to need to take care of performance, even before that, for sure.
Nice. Actually, the Jeff Jack just asked a question. In your experience, what do you feel the average mobile score for performance should be that you want to make sure that your clients get?
Mobile performance is when working with WooCommerce, especially when you have a lot of external dependencies, unless you're building the whole gateway and a lot of the dependencies that you have from third parties involved in the process, it's really hard to get that down. But ideally, I guess, like above the 60s for mobile, when you have WooCommerce, it's good enough to start, because of course, ideally you will get 90 or plus on both, but it's really hard to do that without resorting to building everything from scratch.
Perfect. And then how often do you see clients come to you where they want to start selling stuff and launch a store from scratch versus transitioning to WooCommerce from another setup?
We get a bit of both. I mean, WooCommerce is our main focus, so whenever we can apply and try to build a new store for them. We of course do them efficiently. But in terms of what's the average number of new versus existing migrations, I guess it's like 70% new stores and 30% migrations. I mean, that would be somewhere I have in mind. Maybe I can check back and get back to you later about the number, but I guess that's the number I have in my mind.
I'll bother you during a breakout room or happy hour for happy hour. And then last question before we are done is: did you measure the business impact for Learn with the improvement in speed? And what was the ROI on that for them? Do we know?
I will have to get back to you on that. I mean, I know there was really a benefit in terms of conversions, of course, but about the specific number, I can get back to you on that later. I mean, you point me to, I can share that later in terms of a percentage of improvement. Sorry.
Oh, no problem. Mm-hmm. Matias, thank you so much.